It's indeed an honor and a privilege for me to be here today. I have followed the Institute of the Black World for years from a distance, but this is the first time I have been at one of your events, and I am learning a lot and hope that I can also offer something. The remarks by President Pires were framed for the challenges of the day. The challenges of the continent of Africa, the challenges that face those of us who consider ourselves engaged Pan-Africanists, the challenges for everyone who wants to see Africa move forward. I like the fact that he combined the concepts of Afro-pessimism and Afro-optimism. Afro-pessimism, those folks who always want to tell you what's wrong with Africa. Afro-optimism, those folks who always want to tell you Africa's got it together, is moving ahead, and the world needs to follow. I think he's combined these two perspectives in a way, in something I would refer to as Afro-realism. And what I'd like to do is just sort of talk about a recent survey that will put some additional data and facts to build on the framework that he's given us this morning. Afrobarometer is what I refer to, I explain to people, it's the Gallup poll of Africa. It was launched in 1999, and the goal is to do survey research that will give us some data and understanding of the views, opinions, and attitudes of ordinary Africans on political and economic issues in their countries. It's a lot easier to focus on what the leaders do and say, what the big institutions do and say. It's very hard to find out what Africans in general say. I think watching what's been going on in the United States, the polls are telling us that the American people now don't trust the American people, because all these politicians are saying they are speaking for the American people, but it's hard to know what the real American people think about what's going on. Similarly, in Africa, we don't have enough sources of data. There are two data sources that I consult regularly, at least once a month, just to get a sense of a pulse of Africa. Afrobarometer does an annual survey now in 34 countries in Africa. They put the survey results on the internet, free download, and they make the data available to people who want to analyze them. They post on their website working papers, and there are over 125 working papers where people have analyzed this data. The most recent really big, and they do these for country level as well as sometimes aggregating the data so that you can get a region or the continent, at least 32 of the countries. The most recent big data set, all 34 country report just came out this month, in which it looks at poverty and economic conditions in Africa. The Afro-optimists now tell us that Africa is the fastest growing continent in the world, steady growth rates, all these great things, and we hear that a lot. Well, what this survey did is they wanted to try to see, given these very positive results that are being touted, what do Africans think about this, the people who live there? If you go and visit and spend time with your friends, you will probably hear frequently, I'm telling my friends about all the good things in Africa, and they say, well, life for us is a little bit different from that. So what do these findings say? Let me first tell you that the Afrobarometer is a collaborative research operation. In the United States, the main partner is Michigan State. I'm proud to say that the co-director is also a former student of mine. So I heard her on the radio talking about this, which is why I listened to what she was saying. And their Africa partners are in Ghana, the Center for Democratic Development; in South Africa, the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation; In Benin, the Institute for Empirical Research in Political Economy, and in Kenya, the Institute for Development Studies. Major findings of their new report: 1, poverty and economic conditions, which is focused on poverty and economic conditions. They essentially tell us that 17% of Africans say that they frequently go without food. 22% lack clean water on a regular basis. 20% often go without medical care. 50% do without these necessities at least occasionally, particularly in West Africa and East Africa. Conditions are somewhat better in North Africa and Southern Africa. 53% of Africans rated their national economy negatively. 38% said that their national economy has gotten worse in the past years. And 56% say they are doing that their governments are doing a bad job of managing the economy. And even higher numbers rate them poorly for improving the living standards of the poor, for creating jobs, and for narrowing income gaps. So we've got the Afro-optimists and the Afro-pessimists. There seems to be a disconnect between the great things and improvements that are happening in terms of economic growth and life as lived and perceived by at least a quarter of the people who live in the countries that were surveyed. Between now and December, Afrobarometer is going to release 3 other reports based on their survey findings: 1 on democracy, 1 on corruption, and finally 1 on internet usage. Now I make these comments because I think it's very important as we talk about democracy, development, and the way forward, that the views and the lived circumstances of the Africans are also taken into account. Everybody sitting around this table has an opposite number in Africa. By that I mean whatever your professional, religious, sort of avocational interests are, civic engagement, there are people on the continent of Africa who are doing similar things. If you're interested in education, if you're interested in environmental issues, and I think as we try to come up with recommendations that might come out of this session and things that you do in other areas of your life, one of the approaches might be to say, who are my opposite numbers in Africa? What resources do I have access to in my personal, professional, and community life that I might share in ways that will enhance the efforts of people, my opposite numbers of some place in Africa who are working in this same area? I think that we can get special synergies if that is one of the ways in which we attempt to operationalize Pan-Africanism. I do that in my own work now by focusing on higher education. The fact that I've taught at several universities in Africa, that I have students who go there to study, who work there, I have found that there are ways in which I can make resources that are available at my own institution and at other American universities available to strengthening higher education in Africa. So that is what I'm going to encourage us to put on the agenda when we get to the recommendation stage. And then just as a sort of a throwaway point, but I think is important, is that African governments need to focus as much attention on poverty reduction efforts as they do on growing their economies.